What's up? Well, good day, my friends. My name is Taylor Moorfield, and today I want to look at ways to effectively find, use, and create camouflage in your environment. This video may eventually grow into a series of videos because we could talk about this stuff for hours or more, but for now I just want to look at ways to use camouflage effectively in the environment in which you find yourself. So before we go into some aspects of seasonal camouflage, I want to take a minute to talk about some cultural assumptions that are made about people who wear camouflage in public. Even myself being someone who wears camouflage a lot, I find myself sort of subconsciously stereotyping people who wear a lot of camo in public as being trashy or disheveled. And that makes people like that stick out, right? So if you wear camo pants, say, with an actual camo pattern in public, or even worse, camo pants and a camo top of some sort, you can expect to stick out culturally. People are going to look at you and be like, why is he wearing camo? And it just makes people a little suspicious of you. So it's worth mentioning that the same clothing that can help you blend into an environment physically can make you stick out culturally. So in the interest of covering all aspects of camouflage, it's important to mention that and to be aware of that. Something like I'm wearing now it's not going to stick out at all in public to other people, and it's going to do a fair job of blending me in an urban or in a rural environment like the one behind me here. So sometimes casual clothing like this that's naturally colored, it's kind of the color of your surroundings, is a good compromise to avoid sticking out culturally while still being able to blend in physically. So to demonstrate the effectiveness of casual camouflage, just what I'm wearing right now, I'm just going to go for a walk up in the woods behind me, and I'm going to grab a seat when I get a little farther up there and see if you can notice how slowly it becomes harder and harder to see me, even though I have on just regular clothing that happens to blend into my environment. One important tip that I make use of a lot for hiding yourself if you're not in high quality camouflage made to hide you is focus on hiding the most noticeable parts of a human body. And usually that's the hands and the head, especially the face. As I get up there, I'm going to make sure that my hands and my face are out of sight of the camera, but I'm not going to worry so much about the rest of my body. Alright friends, well now that we've got the hokey stuff like cultural camouflage out of the way, we're going to look at actual camouflage patterns and talk about some pros and cons of each. So we have kind of different levels of camouflage. It's kind of like a spectrum. And so the more effective your camouflage becomes at hiding you, sometimes the harder it becomes to move around. So that's something to keep in mind as we go about these. So first we have the casual camouflage. It could either be something patterned like this sweater. Ideally it will be something patterned because a pattern breaks up your shape a little more than a solid color does. But solid colors work too. If you're in this environment here and you're wearing brown or tan or green, you know, you're not going to stick out too bad at all. And then the next level up, I would say, would just be a typical patterned type clothing that's camo but is still a regular piece of clothing, like this pair of pants here. This is a hunting camo pattern, and hunting camo, such as this Mossy Oak Obsession pattern, It has digital prints of actual stuff, right? So you can like take some leaves and throw it on there, and obviously it's real wet. It's been raining here, but if it were dry, these leaves would be a little brighter colored, and you know, it'd be kind of hard to see what's actually a leaf and what's just a picture of a leaf. And that's kind of the idea. Up here we have a camo top that's a little darker colored, so it might be nice to wear in rainy weather like this. The whole landscape gets a little darker in color after a rain and during a rain, so it's something to keep in mind. You can see how much all this sticks out really, because the ground is so much darker. And then we've got regular clothes and military patterns like these right here. So this is just a few pairs of trousers I found in my drawers. This is actually not multicam, it's a new military pattern. I think it's called Scorpio or something similar to that. Very similar to multicam. Again, the idea with multicam is that it doesn't work super well anywhere, but you can use it in a variety of different environments, and it'll hide you pretty darn good if you're any good at hiding. So I like to use multicam in the summer if I'm in big timber areas with a lot of gray and brown. And it's also pretty good in fields with a lot of dead kind of tan grass, interestingly enough. Not so good in super leafy green areas, but if you're good at hiding, you can get away with it. I will say digital patterns, I was a big fan of them for a long time, and from a distance they work really, really well. But you know, as you get closer to someone, if you're trying to hide from people who are really close to you most of the time, it's probably a better idea to go with something a little more realistic. Up here we have a multicam poncho and a multicam hat. The good thing about a poncho is that it also breaks up your silhouette. I don't know if we talked about this yet in this video, but there's one thing that's really important in camouflage is breaking up the human shape. You know, even if you're camouflaged really well, if someone can see that human shape with the head and the hands and the shoulders and the legs and the hips, you know, they're gonna know it's a human. So a poncho does a lot to break that up. Ponchos tend to be a little loud. You know, if I shake this one around, it's gonna, see it's rattling a bit compared to a pair of pants, not so much. And a leaf suit, even less, right? So that brings us to the next level of camouflage, which is three-dimensional camouflage. So you kind of have two categories of three-dimensional camouflage. You've got leaf suits and ghillie suits. So this is a leaf suit here. It has 3D printings of leaves that kind of move with the wind, similarly to how an actual leaf or branch would sway with the wind. These are super quiet, which is really nice. They don't snag as bad as they might look like they do. They're quote-unquote snag resistant. If you're in a huge briar patch, they're still gonna, you know, snag and tear up. But if you're kind of cautious and you happen to, you know, snag it a bit, it's probably just gonna pop right loose. All right, so that's the leaf suit. And then finally we have up here the ghillie suit, which is arguably the most effective type of rural camouflage available. This is a homemade suit that I'm working on. It's mostly done, just got a few bald areas. There's one down there at the back of the leg, and I gotta add a few things to the head. We're gonna spend some time talking about ghillie suits on their own, but the first thing I would just say briefly is that they do restrict your movement a little bit. They get really hot in hot weather, and they're still not an invisibility cloak. You still can't just move however you want. Your movement patterns and the environment you're in are still just as important. You can't get careless just because you're wearing a really high quality camo suit. But if you hold still in a ghillie suit and you're in an environment that looks like that suit, man, it's going to be very hard for anyone to find you. I'm just going to go over a few things I wish I had known before I started to make my own ghillie suits. All right, rule number one. In my opinion, never waste your money on a pre-made commercial ghillie suit. There's these companies that sell what look like really nice ghillie suits on the internet, pre-made for anywhere from $50 to like $200 or more. And you can make your own ghillie suit if you're resourceful for next to nothing. So my very first ghillie suit that I ever owned was a pre-made purchase ghillie suit, and it was advertised as a woodland pattern. And it looks pretty nice on the photo. Like I don't know if they just dress up the photo with like Photoshop, or if it's not the actual suit that you buy that you see in the picture, but it looks great. But when I got it, it had colors from green to brown to black to tan to white to gray to yellow
and they were like shiny, you know, like the jute material was shiny. It shined in the sunlight, and I'm like, what do I do with it? It looked like I was wearing like a bunch of confetti. You know, it was so silly. And I paid about $120 for that suit, and it was useless, absolutely useless. So make your own suit. It takes a lot of hours, but it's so worth it. There's really no alternative. So you can make ghillie material from like an old t-shirt, if nothing else. It may not be as ideal, but in an emergency situation or a tight spot, or if you just want to try to make something with nothing but what's around you, then you can just rip up pieces of t-shirt and tie them on to like a fishing net in a pattern of some kind and wear it. Because the premise of a ghillie suit is that color isn't the only thing that matters. Silhouette and shape also matter. So the primary advantage of a ghillie suit over general camouflage is this ability to break up the human silhouette. So all we're looking for basically is some kind of fabric or other man-made material that can kind of mimic that, can kind of mimic the shape and look of a leaf or a stick or bark or a tree in general or a bush, anything like that. So ghillie suits can't really be put into a box. You know, it really can go many different directions. But there is a standard method that works really well, and it's cheap, it's affordable, and it's pretty reliable. So we're going to talk about that for a minute. So what I like to do is make a base out of some kind of camouflage attire. It can be pants, it can be a poncho, or it can be a top or a hat, or anything really, but that's some general ideas. And there's kind of two materials you want to look at primarily, in my opinion. One of them being this jute or synthetic ghillie material that you can buy online in a lot of places like Amazon, for instance. Just search ghillie suit kit or ghillie suit material. And this is an artificial, some kind of synthetic yarn type material. And it just mimics, if I take one out, it just kind of mimics either a really thin branch or maybe a spruce or a pine or something like that. And it's great, it works well. It's a little bit, it looks a little bit shimmery in the light, but it's no more so than a leaf, for instance. So that works great. That is a little more expensive. The cheapest option and sort of the old school option is burlap. Just burlap from a burlap sack. You can get the stuff at fabric stores for really cheap. And all you do basically is you cut it up into strips about that wide on average, from my finger to the end of it that way. And then you just tie it on to your base somehow. So a common way to make a base is to take fishing netting like this right here, and just tie your material onto it after you've sewn the netting onto your base. So this is a hat I have. It's not quite done yet, but I have a boonie hat, a military boonie hat as the base, and I've sewn on, pretty crappily sewn on, this net, and then I've just tied on both burlap and jute and synthetic material onto it in different intervals. And so some of this burlap I have spray painted with spray paint like that right there. Some of it I've left its natural color. So either way, and also some of this, I'm gonna actually demonstrate this process here right here. Some of the burlap you want to take the horizontal threads and just pull them out. You can only pull out a few at a time or they get tangled up. But you just start pulling them out. And as you do that, by the time you pull all of them out until the end of the knot, what you end up with is a look like this. It's a bit of a messier, more random look, and it's smaller fibers than a big clump like this. You want, in my opinion, some big clumps like this, because this looks kind of like a leaf from far away. But you also don't want nothing but leaves, or you just like a big, you know, it's too much of the same thing, if that makes sense. Another tip that I would give you is in regards to color. First of all, you don't want too many colors. That was one of the main problems with the commercial suit that I got, is that it tried to do everything. It tried to be like a snow suit and a winter suit and a summer suit and a fall suit and a desert suit and a woodland suit, and it was just ridiculous. So have an idea of the environment you want to blend in to. My woods, you know, are a certain color, and so where you are is a certain color. So just study that color and study patterns and base your colors off of that. And I wouldn't go with more than maybe 10 different colors at the most. And when I say different colors, I mean very similar colors. Like, for example, the front of this is a little bit darker than the back of this, and I would call those two colors. Ever so slightly different. So maybe a light tan a dark tan, a gray, a dark gray, a slightly lighter gray if you want, a green, a darker green, a brighter green, combination of green and tan, a few blacks maybe, but don't get too rambunctious and, you know, try to make your suit a multicam suit, because ghillie suits are designed to hide you as effectively as possible in one environment, right? You can't really make a ghillie suit effective by trying to make it work in many different environments. Another point about color is don't clump up too many pieces of the same color on your suit. When I first started to make my own ghillie suits, I was a little naive. I was like, you know what? This color right here, for instance, is really nice. Like, it would blend me in really well. I bet I could make a whole ghillie suit with nothing but this color. And I did it, and it looked like crap. Like, I just looked like this big green blob walking around, you know. So you have to have color that mimics the randomness of nature, you know. All right. Another point about ghillie suits that I didn't really learn from a book, but I learned from a friend of mine, is you can use artificial leaves, artificial plants from craft stores like Michael's, for instance. If you have Michael's or any kind of craft store that has decorative artificial plants. This is a kind of a failed ghillie suit project that I need to do a lot of work on to fix, but you can see these leaves are actually made for camouflage. They're like, you know, camo 3D leaf, whatever, on Amazon. But these leaves, which look better in my opinion than these, are just leaves, decorative leaves from Michael's. What you want to be sure though is you don't get a super loud leaf. Some of those leaves are made of some kind of plastic or papery material and they're really loud. So you want to make sure it's not going to rattle too bad with you. And then the last thing I would say is when you're just choosing a base, choose a pattern. If there's going to be any of the camo base showing, choose a pattern that's really effective. One of the reasons this project kind of failed and needs a lot of work is because it was going to be a head and shoulders ghillie suit. So I wasn't going to put any netting and other material down here. It was just going to be nothing but the bare back. And this camo pattern is really not very effective compared to modern camo patterns. This is a pretty old pattern at this point. So, you know, I was like, well, my head and shoulders are going to be really hard to see because of this ghillie material, but everything else is going to show up really well. So, you know, be sure if there's any part of your suit that's going to show its base, make sure the base is an effective pattern that also blends well with the ghillie material. This is a much better ghillie suit than the one to my right. And as you can see, it's got probably no more than 4 or 5 different colors on it. It's got a light green synthetic, it's got a dark green synthetic, it's got some spray painted sort of a grayish green burlap, it's got some lighter green burlap, it's got some tan burlap, not quite enough tan, I'm going to add some tan to this, and it's got a good blend of different colors as it goes along. There's not too much of one color bunched up. So this is a pretty darn effective suit in the summertime especially. You can use it in the fall and the winter if you're careful about where you go. So, you know, ghillie suits are very time consuming. That's the last thing I'll say, is they're really time consuming and you got to be patient. So just play with it. It's something you'll get better at with time, but don't expect to do it perfectly the first time.
So one point I've tried to emphasize throughout this whole video is that your location really matters. Not just your general location, but your specific location. And I hope to demonstrate this by taking 2 camouflage patterns that are very different, putting them side by side in the same environment, but in 2 different backdrops. And you can see just how different the colors and texture of an environment can be, even just a few feet apart from each other. So here I have my ghillie hat sitting in a cedar tree, and it blends quite well, as you can see. Then I've got over here, I've got a leafy face mask, which you can't even really see until I get really close to it, right here. And it's just laying in the leaves. Now these 2 objects are only about 5 feet apart from each other, but as you can see, the environment is totally different. Now what happens if we switch them? Now I'm going to put the ghillie hat down here and put the leaf mask up here, and you can see that sticks out a lot more and this sticks out a lot more. So just a few feet can make a world of difference if you're not paying attention to the actual colors of your backdrop. So just keep that in mind as you design camo suits and you practice camouflage.
There's another advantage to leafy camouflage patterns like this that I didn't mention earlier, and it's an advantage that they have over the ghillie suit, and that is that they are extremely portable. I love to carry this leaf suit around kind of wherever I am if I'm in the woods, because I have a torso suit right here, and I have a hat, and I can ball these up super compact. There it is right there. So if I wear a pair of solid green pants and I have this in my backpack, at any moment I can really quickly get that thing out and blend in instantly.
I don't know if any of you have seen the film Beverly Hills Ninja with Chris Farley. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's really funny. But you know, he's this kind of wannabe ninja, and he's in this clan of real ninjas, and they're going on a mission, but he's not invited. But he's trying to give them advice right before they go, and he's like, remember to stay low so as not to be detected. But ironically, you know, he's totally right. One reason it helps to either stay low or to stay really high is because the human eye likes to look at stuff that's about its height. So I'm about 6 feet tall, so my eyes are probably about 5 feet and 8 inches off the ground. So most of what I see is focused around that height. So if I'm trying to hide from someone, if I either get really low or if I get really high, then it's going to decrease my chances of being seen. So one great example of this in action is if you need to look around a corner, right? So I'm just going to use this tree behind me. It's way too small for me to actually need to peek around it, but we'll just pretend that it's, say, the corner of a building or a really wide tree. So this is the incorrect method. And this is the correct method. Alright, so I want to take a minute to talk about shapes and angles in camouflage. Now in the woods, there's really two main angles. If you look just behind me, you've got kind of like a y-axis and kind of like an x-axis. So you've got trees are generally mostly straight, and the ground is generally pretty horizontal and flat. This has a little bit of a slight angle because we're on a hill here. But notice that and compare it to the human shape. The human shape typically is vertical, right? So if I'm going to travel vertically, as in standing, I want to stay within trees. And if I'm going to travel horizontally, then I want to stay in flat ground, right? So whatever the angles and shapes around you are, that should be the angles and shapes that your body tries to take. So we want to take steps to try to lessen the ability of the human eye to perceive the human silhouette. One way to do that is through three-dimensional camouflage like I'm wearing. Another way is the way you stand. So even when you're traveling vertically, generally speaking, you don't want to just walk around like you would normally. It helps to either walk in a squat like this. Other times it's helpful to stand really straight like a tree. It just depends on your environment. Here's a great example of some natural vegetation that you could either supplement onto your camouflage suit, or you could just gather stuff like this and put it on some clothes that aren't camouflaged, and it would help you tremendously to blend in. So as we walk around these woods, notice all those nice looking shadows. So shadows can be helpful if you hide in them, and they can be a hindrance if yours starts showing up as you walk around. So another thing to keep in mind, there's a lot of S's in camouflage. There's silhouette, there's shape, there's shine, there's shadow, and there are a few more as well. So use your shadows to your advantage. If you're laying flat and you're laying in a straight shadow cast by a tree, then it's going to be very hard for anyone to see you, because you're both using the shadow of the tree to darken anything that might make you stick out, and you're staying totally flat, and the person already sees a line cast by that tree's shadow. So seeing another line, that is your human body, is really not going to stand out very much to them, especially if you keep your heels sideways and you keep your head sideways to help you lay as flat as possible. So let's talk a little bit about terrain. So the human body has mass. There's no way of avoiding that. But ultimately our goal in camouflage is to not disrupt the surroundings, is to act as if we are simply a part of our environment. And so, using the terrain, we can make that easier on ourselves. So notice right here, we have the ground here, and then it kind of goes downhill a little bit. There's a bit of a dip in the ground. So this is a prime area for us to use flat movement, to use horizontal movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the laying down technique, putting the heels sideways and the head sideways. When combined with a depression in the ground, can really make you seem like you don't even have any mass. Another note about the human shape and the human silhouette. This may sound a little bizarre, but one thing that helps is just put your body in a weird position that's not typical of the human. So sometimes just making really weird shapes can help. So let's say I'm going to go here and then here. Sometimes if you're up against something flat like this, just going flat can help. So not like this, but like this. That can help. It's almost like pretending you're part of like a modern art exhibit and you're just like some weird, statue. Just play with that concept and see how you can apply it effectively. Yet another concept that's very important is speed of movement, right? The human eye picks up on movement very well, and the slower you move, the harder it is for the human eye to see you. So if you're trying to be very, very hard to find, even when you move, you've got to move at excruciatingly slow speeds if you're really concerned about being seen. At times, it's going to take a lot of leg strength and leg endurance and cardiovascular endurance to move this slow. So that's a good reason to stay in shape and to get, if you're not in shape, to get in shape and just keep your body well maintained. But it may be necessary to move even slower than that if you're stalking an animal, because animals are much more in tune to survival in general than human beings are. Notice a few times when I was moving slow, I froze instantly. It's important that you have good balance and that you're able to stop at any moment in case the person or animal that you're tracking looks right at you, because you have to stop moving if that's the case, and it's important to be able to do that in a moment's notice without stumbling. So we're going to conclude part one of our study of camouflage right here today. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope you've learned something. To summarize, I guess I'll just say that, camouflage is not complicated. I think we make it way harder than it needs to be. You don't have to go out and buy expensive equipment, though it certainly helps. People have hunted for thousands of years, if not longer, without any kind of special mossy oak obsession pattern or a ghillie suit. If you're intuitive and you trust your instincts and you use your head, then you can blend in with nothing but what you have around you. And if you pay attention to shadow, to shine, to silhouette, to color, and to texture, then you're going a long way to avoid being seen by whoever or whatever you don't want to see you. And remember, at the end of the day, camouflage is simply not disrupting the surroundings that are around you. If you can avoid to disturb what's around you, and you can appear to be part of the landscape, then that's all that's required of camouflage. We all have a good day. Check out my channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you think I missed something, or if you have a question or a comment or a tip. I'm always looking for ways to get better, and I hope you are too. So let's help each other learn and help each other be better people. Y'all have a great day. This is Taylor, and I'm out. That moment when you lay down your ghillie material to look at something and you can't find it, Hashtag ninja problems. Oh, there it is.